go work for companies or bosses that prioritize this and have made this a part of their mission and culture.
Hey everybody, and welcome to our most recent edition of Certacast. I'm so excited to be joined today with Sarah, the CMO of SourceDay, and someone who I've built a relationship in the procurement circle over the last couple of years. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today.
I feel like you're one of my conference buddies.
Yeah, right? Like you get that click.
When we were on the circuit before COVID, I feel like I ran into you all the time at events. So it was really nice to see you at SIG again last year.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was definitely our first time out. You were way more comfortable than me. I was still like full on red ribbon. My masks matched my shirt, you know, to make me feel more comfortable about it. But like, no, I don't want to touch elbows. Like you keep
I was all green.
You were always going to be the first person who was back to being all green, right? Like you needed to get it back. No, it's funny. I remember when we talked that day, I'll be honest, this motivated me for today. One of my favorite compliments I ever got. You notice that I try and wear cool t-shirts, right? Like some people catch on, some people don't. And I can tell you, my wife made this t-shirt for me. This is an homage to your former life in print. The Right On was just a shirt I love. My wife's been obsessed. I got her a Cricut machine for her birthday, and she's just churning out shirts now. So if you thought there was cool shirts before, just wait till second half of 2022. We're taking it up a level.
Etsy, Amazon stores are in your future.
Yeah, I mean, I might need some procurement advice on how to take this, to the market and really sell it.
So my dad is a writer, and so extra love the shirt because I grew up in a kind of a creative, writing-focused family.
That is one of the least surprising things you have ever said to me, based on your energy and how you are. And that's who I am too. Like, so I say I have a blog, but I don't know if you write in it like once every 2 years, if it counts as having a blog. Like, I'm pretty sure my last entry, so I write this blog to my kids, right? Like it's written in like Wonder Years, like you're reading it years later. So it's literally the last entry is about how I went through this whole pandemic and didn't write to them. And they'd be like, reading it later and being like, wait, Dad, like 2020, 2021, you didn't.
You left out 2 or 3 years. I feel like they could transfer to your LinkedIn or video content. Insert
that. And that's where you're the best, right, Sarah? Like, I mean, your ability, as I try and build this space, right? And I'm trying to build kind of a community with Certacast, and I do Mark's Musings. I did Mark's Musings. I've lost my muse a little bit. I'm trying to get back to doing Mark's Musings, but you're always such an inspiration. Like, how do you keep yourself motivated? I watched to see you go to a CMO was like, oh my God, couldn't be a more perfect person to make that transition because of what you had built. But like, how do you keep yourself so motivated? You don't just write one-liners. You're writing true content. How do you make that a priority?
So I think community is the future of growth and marketing. And I think gone are the days where companies are doing what I would call very traditional dinosaur outbound from 2008, when we didn't have all the things that we have today, where you had to go to a trade show to actually collect an email address. I think the world has completely changed, and we are now looking for people to communicate with, people to collaborate with. And let's face it, if I need something new, if my team, for instance, is looking, we were a few months ago looking for a text messaging platform. We were thinking about incorporating text messaging into events that we go to send reminders and notices about our booth or different sessions or things that we were hosting. The first thing I did is I text my 5 smartest marketing friends. And I said, what do you use for text messaging software?
Sure.
Who's your supplier? What platform would you recommend? And that's how people buy today. People buy through community by reaching out to their peers and people they respect versus going online, speaking to a salesperson, and getting pitched to over and over again. So I realized when I started my career that the way that people were selling was completely backwards. And I said, I want to pivot this model and create a sense of community where I'm providing awesome content and useful information that people actually get value from, are entertained, are motivated. And hey, if the company that I'm happen to be at has something of value that can help someone, you know what? I'm going to be top of mind when somebody is ready to buy. So that was really kind of my aha moment, is this cold call outbounding just doesn't work and is not buyer centric.
No, and when I was a procurement leader, at times it's miserable because the question is so off base. The solution might even be something that I needed, but the way that they're approaching me has nothing to do with my problem. It's not specific to me, but you're right. When you see that good video that captures you, you know, it's funny. Because of the fact that he's part of our investment group, I had the privilege of being able to talk to Justin Kahn recently. We was on a call with him, and one of the things he said was, "Nobody cares about your company. There's a million companies that are doing the same thing. People care about the people." And what's going on there, right? It's like, so we automate POs. Great. Lots of people have told me they automate POs. You know, we improve your workflow. I've heard that a million times. What is it bringing? And I think the cool thing about you, Sarah, is, I mean, if anything, if a company has an issue, it's more about like, oh, we are now the Sarah show because you bring so much energy. Like, I mean, come on, the print outfits that you would have at those conferences, like I love, because you and I think we have, one of the reasons we connected is neither of us are ever going to just fit in, right? I mean, that first conference, I remember one of the funniest things about it. So if you look at my LinkedIn profile now, I've switched it to be the Certa shirt when I'm opening it, but it used to be the Superman, right? Like that was my profile picture.
I think when I first messaged you on LinkedIn, I referenced your shirt.
Yeah,
my outreach.
I remember that. And the funniest thing about it to me is just about like different times, like you said, my father's a doctor. And that was one of the first like big conferences that I was going to be like one of the main speakers at, right? Like I'm speaking with the head of some really big companies, and I sent my dad like hey dad, check it out. Like, look at this. I'm on the like front bill of who's speaking. And my dad's first thing was like, that's the picture you let them use of you? Like everybody else is in a dress shirt. And I remember looking at my dad and being like, right, but if you went to that conference and you saw this, like which of those three guys would you want to hang out with and talk to?
Well, and more importantly, who would you remember?
Exactly. And listen, Sarah, anybody who meets you is going to remember you. And I think the thing I love about it with community with you, right, is look, from a selfish capitalistic aspect, you explain why community is really important to the business. And that's great. Right. And obviously all of us have deliverables, and we should be thinking about that and how we're growing our business. And like you said, I love the angle of I'm presenting it in a way that if my solution is right for you, there will be content that helps you understand that. But you use community to do more than that, right? You use community to build up community. And one of the specific things, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this month, is especially what I've seen you do with, you know, women in procurement and that community that you've built. Why is that so important to you? Tell me why that motivates you.
Yeah, so to close out our community conversation a little bit, I want to address a couple other things as well, and then I'll highlight and talk about my passion for women in the industry. So
sure.
As I came to this realization that the way that people buy is completely different and backwards from how a lot of companies are selling, which inspired me to start this whole journey and process of community building. The other thing I realized is it's really important to figure out what you want to be known for, and then go find where your buyers are and get your content or build your community in that place. So I have friends who are in marketing, and they are posting content on every single social platform. And I'll ask them, how do you know your buyers are on Facebook? And they don't really know. How do you know your buyers are on Insta? So it's really important to spend time talking to your customers as much as possible and spending time with people in your industry and asking them, where do you go to get trusted information? How do you buy? How do you make your buying decisions? One of the things that we do at Source Day, we've launched a customer insight program where we interview customers as much as we can. In a perfect world, I'd be talking to customers every single day because it's such an important part of driving our content strategy.
Sure.
But in our interviews, we ask every single person we talk to, what social media platform do you use the most for business?
Interesting.
And so by gathering that data in my first 4.5 months with the company, I have found that most of our buyers are on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that makes sense.
More than any other platform. And so if I want to build a community in supply chain with a direct spend focus, where should I be going to do that? I should be doing it on LinkedIn. If I was at a B2C company selling Hydro Flask water bottles or my Bradley Cooper phone cover, because I'm going to marry Bradley Cooper someday, I would probably not be building a community on LinkedIn. I'd be looking at a different channel. So it's just so important for people to understand where their buyers are by talking to customers and talking to people in your industry, and then building your community via the right channel and platforms. So it's just, I've seen so many people just completely blow it because they don't understand that.
So let me ask you a question about that. So in addition to knowing where your customers are, you see the memes sometimes. Do you post differently depending on which one you're posting on? Like, is there like the more business-based LinkedIn post and the more fun-based, Twitter post, and then TikTok is for the sillier content? Like, do you also think of your approach that way? Like, where I am is going to kind of dictate which content I'm posting?
Yeah, so I think your content is your content no matter what platform. If you know what your buyer cares about, your content is going to be relatively the same, but the way that you execute is going to be different. So for instance, if I'm posting on Twitter, I may be focused on 2 powerful facts. Whereas if I'm posting that same content on LinkedIn, I may talk about those facts, but I may tell an entire story of me talking to a customer or of me talking to a prospect. So same content, but execution should be different.
That makes a ton of sense. I mean, and it's important. Like, know where your customers are. And I love that about talking to your customers, right? To find out, where are you looking at this stuff? What are you reading? What are you interacting with?
If you don't have a customer insight program, drop everything you're doing
and get it started.
And talk to customers as much as you can.
Well, and it's also, I see another thing that people miss on is looking at your posts and how they perform, right? And it's hey, you need to know that, like, hey, if I post a Tuesday at 2, it got 10,000 impressions, but when I posted on Friday at 5 o'clock, I wasted it because everybody was done for the week, and I came back on Monday and there was no post. And looking at those trends about not just where they are, but when they're actually receiving the content, right? Because you can do yourself a disservice.
So I'll say something that I think is really important. So for me, my main community building platform is LinkedIn. Right now, my number 2 is Twitter. I'm looking to launch and create a YouTube channel very soon.
Awesome.
So I just posted a LinkedIn post today, taking a photo of my dining room table. I'm building a video production studio.
I saw it. I love it.
In my Austin apartment. But when you look at the metrics from your post, don't focus on the quantity as much as the quality. So I would much rather have a post that only gets 500 impressions, but has 100 comments from the chief supply chain officers at companies that we want to sell to. So I think that can be a really misguiding metric. I can do a post with me and Bradley Cooper and get 3 million views, but what is that going to do for my business? Probably nothing. So it's really important to look at the engagement with your posts. Are people commenting? What are they saying? And who are those people that are interacting with your posts? So be very, very careful if you're only gauging your strategy based on the metrics versus the quality.
It's really great feedback. It's interesting. So one of the people who gets to coach me, my much younger cousin, happens to be the social media coordinator for the Tampa Bucks. And it's a really fun dynamic because Jill is surrounded by a bunch of sports obsessed boy cousins, and she has a Super Bowl ring. And then we wake up some mornings and go, wait, why is Tom Brady tweeting at Jill? Oh, right, she runs the Bucks accounts, because it throws you off every single time that Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady are like, yeah, good call, Jill. And you're like, wait, what just happened? And it's funny. One of the feedback points she gave me when I first started my journey was just post, right? Like, and it's where I've honestly feel that I've messed up my own brand the last 2 months. I got overwhelmed, right? You know, you get stuck to doing work, and the algorithms matter. And if you stop posting, then when you have that good content, it's not getting to the same amount of people, right? And so I think you're right. Like, as much as I can say, like, hey, be careful about when you're posting, you're really, one of the other really major feedback points is don't have post paralysis, right? Like, you got to get stuff out there. You got to keep it going, because otherwise, I mean, one of the reasons that you're such a great follow is because you know that you're always getting content from Sarah. There's going to be something new. There's other people that are great follows, but it's like, oh, have they posted anything in the last 6 months? Did I stop following them? So it's an interesting balance, but I think it's a really good feedback to make sure that you're not just looking at numbers, right? What do those numbers actually mean? And so that's great feedback.
So I call it dark social. My favorite marketer is named Chris Walker. If you want an awesome marketing podcast, The State of Demand Gen is my absolute favorite podcast. I listen to it every single day. I get mad when I don't have a new episode. I went to the gym this morning and I was all caught up. And he talks about something called dark social. And dark social is what you call things like social media, where attribution software doesn't track your ROI well. So you mentioned about the importance of posting consistently. If you were to go open up my calendar right now, I block off time in my calendar 7 days a week. Yes, including the weekends. My best performing LinkedIn posts are always on Saturdays and Sundays, typically. So weekends are an awesome time for me to post on social.
Well, yeah, that's because everybody wants to join your parties, but continue.
So don't let anybody tell you should only post on Monday through Friday. Think about posting on the weekends and look at the metrics and see what works for yourself. But I had so many people tell me not to do it. So what did I do? I posted on Saturday and Sunday, and it's my best time to post. But my point is, I put in my calendar dark social every single day, and I treat it like a meeting. Because for me, community is so important. It's a part of who I am. It's a part of SourceDay's brand, and it's a huge part of our marketing strategy that I care about it so much. It's like a meeting to me. And because it's in my calendar that way, it happens every day. If I didn't book it like a meeting and it's 7 o'clock at night and I'm tired and I go want to do something else, it's easy to just push it off and then push it off again. So if you are someone who's struggling with posting regular, consistent content, think about including it in your calendar.
It's a really good feedback point. So let's circle back now, right? Now that we've talked through it a bit more, and talk about the other side of the community, right? Which I brought about a little bit. You build community, and you go out of your way. Like, one of the things, when I told you I was doing, Mark's Musing and Certacast, I specifically remember within 30 minutes, there was a new LinkedIn post. And one of the things that you said on the LinkedIn post is like, oh, Just ran into Mark. Haven't seen him in a while. Really excited to see him. You got to check out. He's got cool shirts on. This is his thing. And like two of the people who I know follow my podcast, right, and or Mark's musings, and have told me they really like it. Like I know definitively that they came from that post, from your community. They saw the connection, and that's why I was so excited when you had a post that said, "Hey, one of the things I saw was get together with other people who are trying to build community and use yourself." And I was like, Sarah, please, like, come join me. There's no one who I would think is better. But you've used it for a power of good, and I've seen it in a couple of different ways, right? So one, I've seen the women in procurement and some of the stuff you've done there. But I also, what I would call out is in the last 2 years, especially with the pandemic and everything else, you're trying to help people, right? You use your power of community to try and get intelligent people that you've worked with in different space to the new role or the new connection that could help them. Talk about why that's so important to you and how you see that.
Yeah, so two things that I'm really passionate about personally, which happen just to tie into me being a marketer and me being in supply chain as well. And the first is that I think people in supply chain and procurement need to do a better job of branding and building their networks. I have so many friends that are procurement professionals, and they do not ever spend time reaching out to people, building their networks, having virtual coffees, and most importantly, posting on social and internally and bragging about all the awesome things that they do in procurement. They accomplish so much, but it's never talked about. And so it's important for people to help, I think, rebrand our industry by letting people know how cool and awesome it is and all the things that we do and accomplish. That helps people get raises. It helps elevate what we do in the industry. And it's so, so important. So that's the first thing I try to do is use my community to encourage and inspire other people in the industry to build their own brands and talk about their knowledge and the things that they've learned and are doing. The second thing is elevating women in the industry. So I've been in supply chain now for several years. When I got into the industry, I can say there were not very many women in a lot of the meetings I went. Conferences were primarily male dominated. And I want to let women know that there are amazing opportunities in our industry and at least help people gain the skills that they need to be considered for executive level and leadership positions. I don't believe that women should get an unfair advantage. I believe that the most qualified person should always be hired. But I feel that in some cases, there's no women even considered because they don't have the qualifications or the right background. So I want to encourage women to get into our industry, to kick butt, and to be considered for those promotions and those positions. So I'm doing several different things, but a couple of the ones that I think are really important is I host 3 LinkedIn Live shows a month. And one of my shows is a women-only panel show. And it's called Women in ERP. And I bring 4 panelists on a month, all female, and I interview and talk about their stories and experiences being women in the ERP space. And I have not seen any other show in the market that has female-only panels. And I have actually had people reach out to me and say, we are so inspired that every time we join your show, there's female panelists and it's the entire panel is female. And we just think that's amazing. So I'm hoping that that's inspiring and encouraging people to get out there. So that's the first thing that I'm really focused on. And in conjunction with the Women in ERP show, I've also launched a Women in ERP awards program. We're taking nominations through April 15th, and anybody in the industry can nominate outstanding women in ERP. We're going to publish a top 25, top 50, or top 100 list, And then we're going to feature and highlight all those women throughout the year. The second thing that I've done is I've launched a happy hour networking group that meets virtually twice a month. And I started it April 2020 when COVID hit. And I just said, oh my gosh, I'm like a super, extrovert, introvert person, but I get energy from being around people, and I may not be around people for a long time. So what am I going to do? So I launched this group, and we became a family, and we met every single Wednesday for 12 months. And it was people from all over the world in supply chain coming on. We would introduce ourselves, give personal updates, and then every time I had a topic that we would talk about. And that has now morphed into this incredible community. We now meet twice a month, and women, it's men and women, but women in this group have talked about how it's changed their lives, how they've gotten jobs, how they feel they've learned to be leaders, and just have done so much and learned so much from being in this community. So those are two things in particular that I just wanted to call out, and I think are important initiatives that I'm really passionate about.
I mean, I love, and it's one of the reasons, again, that I wanted to have you on. And I think that, look, I always say this, and I've said it in more forums. It's, sometimes when I'm talking to women and sometimes when I'm talking to minorities. As a white man, I think I have to say it stronger than you do, right? Yes, the most qualified person should always get the job. I agree, right? But bluntly, if I have two candidates and they're exactly the same, and one's a woman and one's a man, then 95% of the time, she probably had to walk a bit harder of a road to get there, right? The other thing is, at a certain point, until things are balanced, I'm comfortable being the one who tries to shift the scale, And it's kind of like a joke to me, but it's like, maybe I gave somebody a little bit of a leg up, but I feel like the overall universe is balancing it out. I'm not going to feel bad, right, for doing that, because to your point, I was at a company and we started an employee relations group, and it was for our Black professionals. And I was one of the executive sponsors, and we suggested another gentleman as the other executive sponsor because it was a Black man. And the commentary that was given back to me is like, well, wait, we said executive sponsors had to be within this level. And I said, okay, but none of our Black employees are at that level right now. So isn't that the whole point of this group? Like, what are we, right? And so sometimes I think you have to be willing to shake up the conversation. I love the way you've done it, right? Because you're not doing it from I'm asking for more. And that's what these conversations are so often, right? And that's what I think so many people miss. No one's asking for a handout. No one's saying, like, make it easier for me. What I hear, whether it's from, women talking about this, whether it's from minorities talking about this, from any different group that's trying, it's give me my chance and I will show you why I am just as good, if not better, than what you're talking to, right? And I say this all the time. You cannot show me a situation where you have opened yourself to more opportunities, whether that's diversity wise, whatever, where that makes the situation less productive. There is a multitude of examples of the exact opposite with, I always say American sports is the easiest one to look at, right? Like how high the quality increased when they went, oh, maybe we should let everybody play together, right? There's not examples where you're like, oh, we let everybody get in here and it got worse. There's a lot of examples of like, ooh, it's much more competitive now because like you better be good at this. And I love that, as I've always cared about these things, but as a father of daughters, right? And I can tell you this, Sarah, you're someone that it's easy for me to like, whether it's my nieces or my own girls, be like, you don't have to listen to that. Look, you can do your own thing. Here's someone you can look at who looks like you, who's doing that, right? And this sentence is said a lot lately, but it's important. Representation matters. And you want to tell someone they could be whatever they want. Being able to see people in those roles matters. And I think the way that you've driven some of this change is fantastic. I think one of the things that maybe you undersold a little bit is as much as you appeal to the women in ERP, when I look at your communities, it's not like it's only women, right? Like there is very many and powerful men in this space that are part of that group. And I am sure of it, are better for it, right? Because they're part of those conversations with you. So, I mean, major kudos to you for what you're doing there. I think one of my proudest moments was one of the conference circuits. They asked me to come speak, and this is during the pandemic, right? And we decided we were going to speak about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they said, absolutely, we want you on the panel. You'll host the panel. Do you have any other requirements? And I was like, yes. Please don't make it just me and a bunch of other white men. Like, don't make it four white dudes talking about diversity and equity and inclusion. It's the most painful thing in the world because it's just, what are we doing, right? Like, how can we be having that conversation if we're not actually having a diverse group, right? And so, yeah, I think it's so special as you continue with this, right? And you look at the market now and you look at, so there's obviously changes, but we still have ways to go, right? And I think, with you and I, at times it's not just about like your direct community, right? Because maybe things have gotten a lot better in the States, but when I look at some of the employees I have in certain areas in India and Pakistan, right, there's still a lot of challenges, right? What do you see as some of the things we need to do to further empower women to be able to have an equal share, right? To your say, to not give them the advantage, but to be able to say you have an equal share at the table, you have an equal opportunity here. What are some of the steps that we can take as leaders to empower that?
So I would say two things come to mind. The first is you've got to have executive buy-in. It's really, really hard for a manager or a director level person to drive significant change if your executive team is not bought in and supporting you financially and with the development resources that are needed. So go work for companies or bosses that prioritize this and have made this a part of their mission and culture. Second thing is I don't care about people's titles. So what's happened a lot is I will be working on putting events together. And the event people will ask me, hey, is there anyone else in your network that you'd recommend for this panel, for example? And they only want C-level titles. And I think that's completely backwards and irrelevant. So when I'm hosting events in person, virtually, I'm seeking out people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, and all titles. So if we can open our minds and say, there are women and men doing awesome things at all phases in their career, we have so much to learn from people in that area as well who haven't just made it to the C-suite. Let's get them on those stages and let's get them on those panels.
Hell, lots of times you can learn more from those people. Like, let's be honest. Like, my biggest fear since I've gotten to this level is like, the line from the Batman movie, right? Was like, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. Where as a leader, the biggest concern is reality dictates that you get further and further away from the meat of it, right? Like the details, the nuance. You have to talk to those people if you really want to get the expertise. So I think that's fantastic. And I couldn't be more aligned.
So I'm putting an event together, a panel discussion in June. And one of the things that I consciously did was I sought out somebody who's in her first year after college in supply chain. And I want that perspective on my panel because the things that she's doing and experiencing are very different than somebody who's been in the industry for a long time. So I actually seek it out and I encourage and hope that others will do the same.
I love it. So this has been such an awesome conversation. There's one, I don't know if I've ever said this to you before, but it always makes me laugh. So you have this Bradley Cooper thing. I think you've made it clear as we've done our episode today. So it's one of my favorite stories. So we were at a wedding and my wife's telling the story about how we had been in a store and this younger woman came up to me and basically was like, you look like Bradley Cooper. And my wife was like, I prefer Bradley Cooper. I was like, thanks, hon. That's great. And it was decided at that wedding that I am Kmart Bradley Cooper. And so it's literally, I have a circle of friends that is my nickname. Like, the homeless man's Bradley
So I
Cooper.
feel like I need to get a shirt made with your head and a Kmart Bradley on it, and I would totally rock it.
For the next time we have you on, or if I get to come on to your podcast, I'll have to have my wife make those shirts for us. We'll have to rock them. This was absolutely fantastic, Sarah. I always enjoy our conversations and really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. If anyone's interested in furthering the conversation about community building or women in supply chain, shoot me a note on LinkedIn. I also have 2 hashtags that I'm building for the communities as well. So follow hashtag women in ERP and hashtag manufacturing maven on LinkedIn.
That's fantastic. Well, Sarah, thank you again so much. And I hope you have an awesome rest of the day.
Thanks, Mark.